Superman yields to their request and vows in a speech at the United Nations that he's going to end the arms race.
Hello, I'm Louis Meyers. I'm the host of Meet the Author, which is seen regularly here on a monthly basis. And today we're going to do something a little different. Usually we talk to authors who have written books. But today I have with us Miss Anastasia Arvin-DiBlasio, who is a third-year medical student at University of Vermont Medical Center and also has been working in emergency departments around the state and currently is also an EMT working on ambulances and rescue squads. In fact, she is here this morning having worked all night last night on the ambulance, so we have a special appreciation for that effort. I wanted her to come today to talk about literature. She's going to read us a couple of essays and poems that she's written, and we're going to chat a little bit about how literature has helped her through the process of medical school, which can be a very grueling process. So welcome.
Thank you.
I thought we would just start. I know you have an essay you'd like to read about some of the experiences you had on the ambulance, and then we can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So this is an essay I wrote just regarding kind of how my view of patient care has changed over the course of the time that I've been involved in medicine. And it is called The Man Who Cried. The man's name was Combo, and he wasn't real, but I had met him before. Perhaps it was the tattoos that made me recognize him. A pair of dice on his left cheek, a tear under his right eye, a star on the same earlobe. Words too small to read ringed his neck, and letters covered his knuckles. The majority of them were stick and poke, some so faded I wanted to reach out and wipe them away like a smudge of soot. They made me think of my cousin, who has a fishhook tattoo in the webbing between his left thumb and forefinger. It points to a scar he got trying to break up a fight in his halfway house when another man put a pencil through his hand. He was in the halfway house after getting out of prison for using heroin. But maybe it wasn't just the tattoos. Maybe it was the way he moved that told me I knew this man. Erratic, like a spider. A deathly stillness 1 minute, and then an explosive skitter, like he couldn't escape his own skin. Dangerous movement. Movement that could go any direction at any time. His facial expressions were never still, and often didn't match his words. It reminded me of a man I had taken care of in the back of my ambulance. A man with known polysubstance use who had been known to hurt EMS providers when they didn't give him opioids. A man who lied to get his way and took advantage of people's better nature. Then again, maybe it wasn't only that. It's possible it was the man's politics that I had seen before. It was a blend of nationalism and anger, and its only platform seemed to be hatred. It tried to hide behind concern for others. Concern for young mothers trying to feed their children and young men trying to get jobs. As long as they were the right people. White people, straight people, people who agreed with him. I had seen it before in another cousin of mine, one I grew up with. A boy who didn't go to college and barely graduated high school. A child of divorce with an alcoholic mother who sabotaged others' successes. A child who grew up in a place where whole grain bread is exotic. A child I love, and a man I often don't like. Yes, I had met Combo many times. He's a character in This Is England, a British independent film series that I didn't expect to make me reevaluate my patient care. When I first began watching, Combo terrified me. He was violent, with words that channeled the eroding power of vitriol. His actions were even worse. No one was safe, not even children. I was ready to hate him. For the first part of the series, I wrote him off as one of them. A racist, a psychopath, an abuser, a criminal. He was the antagonist. He wasn't my problem or my responsibility. Until later in the series, when he cries. And Combo cries often. In his car, in prison, on his knees and covered in blood. He cries when he learns his mother has died, when the love of his life breaks his heart, and when he thinks too hard about why his father left. And his name. Not Combo, what his neo-Nazi friends call him, but the name his mother picked out. The name she called when he was late for dinner. The name she thought of as she died. The film's cinematography uses long, close-up shots of characters' faces while they speak. I wasn't allowed to look away or block out their words. I shouldn't be. The film forced me to acknowledge that Combo, who stood for so much I stand against, also cried like a child. He was both afraid and feared. He showed capacity for both deep love and deep hatred. He was neither hero nor villain, but terrifyingly human. Combo changes for the better, but not all at once. Saying he's sorry doesn't undo the pain he causes others, or himself. He never truly outruns the consequences of his actions into a sunset or a happily ever after. Things aren't fixed in a single scene with a simple monologue from a wise character. The film asked me to meet the character where he was. I could have turned it off before the credits rolled and saved myself the discomfort. In my chosen profession as a physician, it's my duty to keep watching. Combo is my responsibility. He's my cousin, both of them. He is the man in the ambulance. He's many of the patients I will see in the future. Although not all of them may be as radical, every patient deserves to have a doctor listen to their concerns with their best interests in mind, regardless of who they are outside the exam room. Just because the cameras on This Is England stopped rolling and the actor went home doesn't mean Combo stopped existing. He exists everywhere. My cousin is in recovery and now works as a craftsman and artist making beautiful things. The boy I grew up with, who supports politics I hate, loves his daughter and supports his wife unconditionally. The man in the ambulance is desperately searching for a place to belong. I don't have the luxury of only treating the part of a patient I like, or even the part of a patient that I see. As someone who has worked in EMS and plans to pursue emergency medicine, I owe it to my patients to be the best part of their worst day. As a physician, it is my duty to not look away, no matter what I see. I owe it to Combo in all his forms. I owe it to those who cry when they're alone.
Well, this is the second time I had read this before, and that's why I wanted you to come on this show, because I think it speaks volumes about society and about how you're approaching your career as a physician.
Thank you.
Let's step back for a minute and how you got to this point. You grew up in Vermont. I met Southern Vermont, I believe.
Yeah, Manchester, Vermont.
And went away to college.
Yep, I went to Bowdoin College in Maine, so not too far, but not too close.
And what did you major in at college?
I actually majored in German. I had taken it all through high school, and I knew that I was going to continue it in college, and so it was a pretty short major, just because I already had a lot of credits, and so I knew it would allow me to get my major and then also get all of my pre-med requirements and then also explore some other stuff like creative writing and history, which I really enjoy.
So in college you also began doing some creative writing?
Yeah, I had done creative writing as a hobby for a long time, and I continued to kind of keep up with it in college and, still enjoy writing, obviously.
Do you also write in German?
I used to. I have not written in German in a very long time.
Is there a difference between creative writing in German and creative writing in English for you?
That's a great question. I think, I did reach a point where I was, technically fluent in German, but that was more like essay writing and like conversational. And so I think creative writing in English always allowed me to be more expressive, but there are definitely some German words that they have a certain, je ne sais quoi, whatever the German version of je ne sais quoi is, that, don't really have direct translations.
After college, what was your next step in life?
Yeah, so I graduated college right before COVID, and I moved back in with my parents, and I was there for 4 years. And during that time, I was working as a scribe in an emergency department. I was working as a unit secretary in an emergency department, and I was working EMS on an ambulance.
We actually met in the emergency department where I work.
Yes, we did.
We had a chance to meet, and I noticed that you were not simply writing down words, but were taking in the whole gestalt of the emergency department.
Nice German word.
And even then, yes, and even then learning. Did you know, from what age did you know that you might want to go to medical school?
So I think I knew I wanted to be in medicine when I was 7. And for the longest time I wanted to be a veterinarian. And then when I was 16, I was sitting in AP Bio, and my teacher, who was a very good teacher, Dave Curtis, shout out wherever you are, he started talking about the honeycomb structure of the femur, and I thought it was the coolest thing I had ever heard in my entire life. And I was like, I probably won't be able to get as in-depth with that in veterinary medicine, so I guess I'll work with people. And that, I mean, I don't regret that decision at all. That's where I've been since then.
But in college, you took enough courses to begin to apply for medical school?
Yep.
With your German?
I was able to fit everything in, and I also, like I said, was able to take like some extra classes in creative writing and history and such.
And so then you also began taking EMT courses.
So I didn't end up taking EMT courses until after I had graduated.
Yeah.
But yes, I did do that. I did do a WFR course, a wilderness first responder, in college, which was very fun. And I think that's kind of what first got me into like the idea of emergency medicine, which I really enjoyed.
And tell us about some of your early experiences on the working on the ambulance.
Yeah, so I worked for a very small rescue squad that had, right before I was hired, they were kind of having some financial struggles, and so we didn't have as many resources as some other services in the area. It's a very rural service area. It's a very large service area. I think we would have maybe like one crew to cover 121 square miles. And so it was a lot of responsibility, especially when I, was first hired. I had just gotten my EMT. I was very, green. And there was a lot of stuff that was, really overwhelming and kind of scary. But I couldn't get away. I just continued to, try and push myself and try and get better. And I got to the point that I think when you're in a very high stress field, whether it be medicine or, you're in like a really high class restaurant or whatever, you kind of get to this point where the adrenaline and the stress are either gonna push you and you're gonna embrace it, or you're gonna decide that's not for me. And I think I got to the point where I kind of started enjoying the responsibility and the adrenaline and the stress.
Let's talk about adrenaline, because yes, EMS and emergency medicine certainly has more than its share of adrenaline.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between an adrenaline junkie and someone who uses adrenaline in other ways?
I think you could argue that there's not a big difference, but I think when I just kind of think of the word adrenaline junkie, I think of someone who maybe does like certain activities, like, I don't know, I always think of bungee jumping whenever I think of adrenaline junkie, but someone who's not necessarily using the feeling for, I don't want to say not using it for good, but maybe is only using it for like a personal reason, and it's not necessarily like channeled towards a further goal. It's just like kind of like an event or something fun to do, whereas the other source of adrenaline, it's kind of a driver towards a very specific goal, whether that be making a 5-star meal or treating someone's broken leg.
So I think that's a very helpful distinction. In the kind of work that you have done and hope to do, you generally, sometimes you do see the same people over and over in emergency
Mm-hmm.
departments or on the ambulance, but in general you don't have the longer term relationships that, say, primary care might or other specialties.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you have particular interest in people. You've also had an interest in going, at some point in your life, going into the ministry. Will that be difficult for you to see people just for the short period of time and not have the follow-up?
Yeah, I definitely think, I don't necessarily want to use the word frustrating, but I think it's definitely a trade-off of, you know, maybe you get to be there for a very, you know, scary and finite amount of time, but you don't necessarily get to follow up with that person, which can certainly be, you know, not ideal. You know, we like to know how our patients are doing. We like to know that people are okay. But I also think that, you know, just because you are interacting with someone for a very short amount of time doesn't mean that you're not having a big effect on their life. I think the amount of...
you mentioned it in your, toward the end of the piece.
Yeah, exactly.
Or stay of someone's life.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah, I think that the amount of time you spend with someone doesn't necessarily have to be proportional to the effect that you have on their life.
You have, we're going to talk a little bit more, but you have another piece I think you'd like to read?
Yeah, I do.
And this one I haven't heard, so I'm looking forward to hearing this one.
This actually ties exactly in with what we were talking about, because this was inspired by a really lovely interaction that I had with a patient. That it was very quick. I followed this patient for 2 days, but I like to think that, you know, I was able to have a really good effect on the family and the patient. So this is more of a poem, and it's called "Things I Hope for My Patient from Today." I hope you have a safe drive home. I hope the medicine doesn't have any nasty side effects and does its job well. I hope you get to see your yellow dog that you always talked about and get to catch up on your favorite show that the hospital didn't have the channel for. I hope your mom is able to get some sleep in her own bed and not just the cot we rolled into your room. I hope she's able to relax and believe you'll be okay. I hope your dad never stops kissing you on the forehead the way he did when we told your family your test results were improving. I hope I never see you again, except in my imagination. I hope you go somewhere sunny on vacation, maybe a beach that lets you bring your yellow dog. I hope you wear a hat to keep the sun off your face. I hope you laugh at a corny joke from your dad while your mom helps you build sandcastles. I hope you forget about me, because who wants to remember a trip to the hospital? But I hope I always remember you.
That is remarkably lovely.
Oh, it's remarkably corny, but I don't think they're mutually exclusive. Thank you.
That's so it's too early, I hope, to be talking about burnout in medicine. But it is something that physicians and even medical students struggle with over the years that they're in practice at times for various reasons. What would you prescribe to a fellow colleague or yourself to avoid burnout?
I think insofar as the med school context, and I think it's absolutely applicable to the medical profession in general, is something that I actually heard in like orientation for med school several years ago, and it was from a student the year ahead of me. And they basically said, you know, med school will take as much time as you give it. It's not something with a finite end. So if you say you're going to study for 12 hours, med school will make sure you have enough to study for 12 hours. If you say you're going to do something for 24 hours, med school will fill that gap. It's like water. It will just fill any space that you give it. And so I think one of the really important things that I've learned, and I am very aware I am still green, so who knows if this is going to translate, but I hope so, is that sometimes the best thing you can do for yourself and sometimes the best thing you can do for your patients is just stop working. And I don't mean, you know, like someone is actively needing medical attention and you just walk out of the room and say, no, I'm done. But, you know, there have been times where I've been studying and it's just not working, and I've been like, you know what, maybe I just need to listen to my brain and bake some cookies, or maybe I need to take today off and go for a hike with my dog or something. And it's amazing how like rejuvenating it can feel to just stop working, and it's amazing how much better and more productive you can be after you've taken a break.
That's very good advice for any, and it could apply to other professions as well.
Absolutely,
right? We're not just talking about medicine here. The medical profession itself that you're entering is under great stress, I think.
Sure is.
This political and economic climate. We would anticipate that emergency departments will continue to be the first choice for so many people as they lose primary care, as they lose insurance. So I suspect it's only going to get worse. Let's go back to your first piece, the fellow that you wrote about, and of course we've seen so many people like this in the emergency department. Tell me how you would approach someone like this, who is potentially violent, but also hurting, and but has the potential to hurt others.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things to communicate when you're dealing with patients like this, or even people like this, is the first thing to communicate is that you are not there for the cops, you're not there for, the neighbors who called in a disturbance. You're not even really there for, the patient's family. If that's who, brought this person's behavior to your attention, the only person you're there for is them. And granted, in the EMS context, you as an EMS provider need to keep yourself safe. That's kind of the first thing you learn, and that's always your first priority. But I always kind of like to think of it as I'm my first priority, my colleague is my second priority, and my patient's my third priority. But as soon as I know that my colleague and I are safe, the patient is my first and only priority in that context. And so I think, communicating hey, I know that, you're hurting, or you're scared, or you're sick, or, whatever is going on, but I just want to let you know you are the person that I'm here for. And I don't care.
When you say that to people, what kind of response do you can you generalize it in terms of what kind of response you make?
Yeah, I think it's different. I think a lot of times people don't necessarily believe that, which is very unfortunate, because they have obviously had experiences in the past that have, proven that statement wrong, that, the people that are coming into the situation are not there for them. And so I feel like there's definitely kind of a period of time in the interaction where you kind of have to prove it, that you're there for them. And I think kind of like a non-judgment, I feel like the classic is oh, you have a patient with a swastika tattoo or something like that. And, drawing attention to that is not necessarily going to help you or your patient in that scenario. And so you have to kind of think about yes, maybe this isn't a person that you would, hang out with on the weekends, but that's not what's happening here. That's not what this interaction needs to be.
Were you working during COVID?
Yes, I was working both in the emergency department and on the ambulance.
What was that like for you?
I think that in retrospect, Vermont, or at least the hospital and the service that I was at, was very lucky in that because it's a rural area, we had much less cases than other really densely populated areas. But I also think it was a little concerning. I think, kind of speaking to how green I was, it was a little exciting. I kind of felt like I was actually doing medicine and being involved. But, and then there were some days when, we had all the PPE on and patients were really sick, and I was like, oh, this is real. This is not an episode of ER. This is real life.
Is there, speaking of the episode of ER, is there any particular television show or movie that you have appreciated the most in terms of the way it depicted medicine?
I think I did watch ER, all 15 seasons, all through COVID, which was amazing. And, the one that everyone can't stop talking about right now is The Pit, which is with the same Noah Weil. Dr. Carter grew up and became Dr. Robbie. And I, as a fan who is also apparently a very old soul, am very appreciative of that transformation.
Well, there has been a couple things on EMS. I thought since you're here, I'll ask, since you're experienced in this. One is the trend toward sending social workers or mental health counselors out with EMS or with the police to situations that are unstable, or people that are unstable. And I'm wondering, have you seen that? Are we using that in Vermont at all?
We might be using it in Vermont. I have not experienced it at either of the services that I have worked at or am currently working at. I think that's a phenomenal idea. My service has, I don't want to say gotten into trouble, but we've had some very concerning and kind of high stakes calls recently where that was not an option. And I think if it had been, it would have been very helpful for everyone involved, and we may have had a better and safer outcome to the call. But if that is something that can happen, I think honestly that can only, as long as it's done well and implemented smoothly, I think it can honestly only have positive effects.
Because let's be honest, not everyone on EMSs has the kind of sensitivity that you do. I mean, we would like to think they do, but you know, it's a wide range of people end up on work on EMS. And,
sure.
And so that having someone who's actually got the professional training might be helpful.
Absolutely.
The other trend that may or may not take off is having EMS and paramedics do some essentially primary care in the home of sorts to try and avoid bringing people into the emergency department when they don't need to be there. In other words, have you seen that yet in Vermont?
I have not seen that yet in Vermont. I think that's also something that the implementation of it is probably going to be the biggest piece, because I feel like you said, a lot of different people do EMS, and I think particularly in Vermont and other rural areas where a lot of it is volunteer, there is sometimes a very specific culture of kind of, I'm trying to think of a way to describe this. I don't want to say, I'll say maybe kind of like a cowboy culture of like, we're going to go in when things get bad, and then, you know, once the situation's under control, because we just did what we have to do, we're going to leave. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes that's what needs to be done. But I think, you know, you can kind of think of it like firefighters. Like, what do firefighters do? They put out fires. Well, yes, but they also do a lot of other things, but that's just kind of not what we have in our mind. And so I think, you know, what do EMS providers do? Oh, they go in and save lives. Well, yes, but we also do a lot of other things. And I think, you know, the culture maybe is caught up in that, you know, 40% of the very acute things, and kind of leaves out maybe that other 60%. I just completely made up those numbers, but you know,
I think it's probably close to accurate.
Yeah, I think if we were to implement that, I think it could be very good, but I think it might require a cultural shift as well.
And finally, before we end, you have told me off air that if you had not gone to medical school, or even after medical school, after you practiced for some years, you might be interested in the ministry. Tell us a little bit about your interest in the ministry and how that reflects you.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a Christian household, and it's something that I held on to when I went to college, and now that I'm in medical school, and I was very lucky to attend a really like accepting and tolerant and very, I can only describe it as like cozy church in college. It was really welcoming, and it was very non-traditional in the sense that, you know, we didn't like do any liturgy and there weren't any hymns. It was just like people showing up in their Pats jerseys on Sundays and having chili cook-offs and just kind of like loving each other, and it was very community focused, and I really liked that. And so I think that it's, you know, when you describe it that way, it's really not that different than medicine, or at least the kind of medicine that I would like to practice. And so if I didn't get into med school, I was going to get my paramedic and also go to seminary and become a pastor. And who knows, maybe that'll be my retirement gig.
And if it is, we would all be fortunate, because I think
Thank you.
You're an example of someone who is putting care of the body and soul together. And hopefully medical schools are not only accepting of this, but also supporting and encouraging people to pay heed to both. These are difficult times, and I think we need people like you. So I was very pleased when you got accepted in medical school, very pleased to be working with you now as you near graduation and soon to be Dr. DiBlasio. So is there anything else you want to add? Or?
Oh gosh, putting me on the spot. I don't think so. This has been a really lovely conversation. Thank you so much for inviting me on. I really enjoyed it.
Well, we hope that you won't have to see her in the ambulance, but if you do, you'll be well cared for. So I want to thank everyone, and please continue to support this telethon, to support this station, because they do so many wonderful things year-round. Thank you so much.
We're going now to realize that there are no Supermen, and that nobody can come down and help us single-handedly. But we have the next best thing. We have people like Pat Leahy.